All right, since we're on the front side of the camera, let's talk a little bit about lenses. We have our lens alignment mark where you want to get those two white dots aligned up. Let me do a quick little demo here for you. And so let me get my camera pointed towards our camera. And so what you want to be looking for on these lenses, and the word of warning with Nikon is they like to be different. And for anyone who knows about tightening screws, righty-tighty, you know how you turn your screws, make sure they're tight. It is opposite on Nikon cameras. And so it's lefty-tighty, righty-loosey on this one's. And so it kind of turns opposite. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I just know that it does it. And so be aware of that when you're changing lenses. Lens release, going to press down on that to get the release pin taken off. Now, as far as the lenses go, we have two major categories of lenses, FX lenses and DX lenses. And it's pretty easy to tell DX lenses because they are labeled as DX lenses. If they are not labeled, then they're an FX lens. They don't say FX on them. And so these are designed for the full frame sensor and the crop frame sensor used in the Nikon cameras. So as light goes through the full frame sensor, it creates a large image circle which covers that full frame sensor area. The DX lenses are specially designed with a smaller image circle which is designed for the smaller sensor size built into these cameras that have the APS-C sensor or the DX sensor as Nikon likes to call it. Where things get interesting is if you swap lenses. So if you take your DX lens for the D500 and you put it on a D5 or D800 or something like that, it's not going to be able to cover the full sensor area. So you are either going to get dark corners or your camera will automatically DX crop it and you'll get a portion in the middle of the frame. And so you can either choose in your full frame cameras whether you want to get the whole area with the dark corners or you just want to get a clean image in the middle of the frame. As an owner of a D500, feel free to purchase FX lenses because they don't have any negative impact on your sensor. It shoots a very large image circle and you're going to be capturing a smaller area in the middle. And so don't get too confused by lenses. I know you're like, well, do I have different numbers? No, a 200 millimeter lens is a 200 millimeter lens. But with this camera, what you see is going to be a little bit different. What you see through the viewfinder is exactly what you get. So Nikon, to be honest with you, has three different lenses. So they have the DX lenses, which are designed for the small sensor like the one in the D500. They have their FX lenses designed for their full frame, which will work perfectly well on this camera. And when you look at telephoto lenses, you're not going to find very many DX lenses. They're going to be FX lenses that you just use on this lens, on this camera. And they do also make another little subcategory. This is for their little mirrorless system. They have something called the Nikon 1 series. And these are designed for a very small sensor, 8 by 13 millimeters. And these don't work on any of the SLRs and does not work on this camera at all. It doesn't mount on, there's no adapters. And so just be aware, just because it says Nikon, just make sure that it's the right type of Nikon lens for this camera. So this 16 to 80 is a nice basic lens for the camera, and Nikon's got a lot of great features when it comes to their lenses, and the features that they are most proud about get letters that get printed on the lens. And so these are some of the different features or functions or attributes to this particular lens, and we're not going to go through what each of these means right here. We don't have time for it, but they are all descriptions of the lens in some way or another. All the lenses, well, most all the lenses will have different size filter threads, so make sure that you check that if you want to get polarizers or UV filters for your lens. I recommend using the hood mount or the hood as much as possible to block stray light from causing flare or loss of contrast. Zoom lenses will have a big zoom ring and a little focal length indicator to let you know what focal length you are currently at. Focusing rings will vary from lens to lens, but what those two rings are for. The distancing scale is to let you know where the lens is focused at. Now the camera is automatically going to focus for you in most situations, but if you do want to manually focus, this can be of benefit. Our lens info, which will tell us all the information about the lens, and then our lens mount mark and our CPU contacts. Now, something that is slightly confusing about some of the Nikon lenses is the focusing switch. And so the A and M one is pretty easy to figure out. Manual focus, and let's move it over, autofocus. Now, some of the fancier lenses, you are either in manual focus or you are in autofocus that has a manual override option. And so the lens that we have here, if we want to get a close shot of this, you will see that it says MA on it. And what that means is that I can focus with the lens, and let's see if I can turn it down here a little bit. So you can see that I'm focusing. And if I want to, with my finger left halfway down on the shutter release, I can come in here and I can readjust focus if I want to. And it doesn't damage the camera in any way or the lens. If it just says M, don't go grab the focusing ring and try to manually focus when the camera is autofocusing. And so this just allows us to go in and tweak the focusing so that we can take another shot with an adjusted focus on it. And so that's what the higher end autofocus lenses will typically have. So the basic zooms that you might encounter with this camera, the 16 to 80 is a good general purpose lens. If you want more range, you can look at the 18 to 200. If you want to get into telephoto, the 70 to 300 is pretty nice. And the 80 to 400 is generally the biggest lens that you're going to feel comfortable hand-holding for a fair length of time. And since this camera is so good at telephoto, I imagine this camera is going to be matched up with that 80 to 400. It is a little bit higher quality lens than the 70 to 300 just in the overall construction of the lens. If you're wanting a zoom lens that lets in a bit more light, the Nikon 17 to 55 is their only kind of general purpose lens that goes down to 2.8 for this camera. And so that's a good choice. Very good quality lens, great quality optics. Does have some strong competition out on the market. Tamron makes a very good one that I like. That's quite a bit less money, but I think is a very good value. Sigma makes the fastest ones. They make kind of a normal zoom, and they make a telephoto zoom that is a 1.8 aperture on it, which is incredible. Those are the fastest zooms that you can get. And so if you really want to zoom and you want to let in a lot of light, take a look at those Sigma lenses. They're also optically very, very good. And they're a little bit expensive and big. So having a crop frame sensor means that you have to kind of get into the right lenses to get wide angles. So the Nikon 10 to 24 would probably be the first choice for most photographers. Some other good choices. For people on a budget, look at the Tamron. They have a good value one. If you want the widest lens you can get, you go with the Sigma 8 to 16. My favorite are the Tokinas. I really like the 11 to 20 2.8. I think that's fast enough for most uses, but it gives you a pretty good range. But if you wanted the fastest wide-angle lens, they have an f2 14 to 20. And I have no qualms at all about recommending Tokina, Tamron, or Sigma here. I think perfectly good choices in this situation. They offer something that Nikon doesn't offer. For the premium zooms, you can look at the 24 to 120, 24 to 70, these constant either f4 or 2.8 zooms, and of course kind of their premier telephoto zoom, the 70 to 2.8, 200, 2.8, legendary lens, fantastic, is going to work very good with this camera. Highly recommend almost for everyone is having at least one prime lens. And so Nikon has recently been introducing a number of really nice f1.8 lenses. And so the 35, the 85 here are some really nice lenses that let in a lot of light, relatively small for what they are, but are some really nice lenses as well as the other ones listed up here. So if you want to know more about lenses, I could talk all day. In fact, I could talk for 2 days on this. In fact, I've done that already. I do have a class. I love the Nikon lenses, and I'd like to go into it in this 2-day class. I go through every imaginable aspect about lenses, how they work, the features, the technology, what's really going on inside the lens. I talk about how to even buy and sell your lenses. And so if you want to know everything there is to know about lenses, this is the class that you want to look at because it is fully dedicated just to Nikon lenses. And I don't worry about anything else on there. So Nikon lens class, another good class, good companion class for this class.